Great. Well, my name is Eric Nelson, Client Engagement Officer at TRG Arts. So happy to be with you here today to talk a bit about our COVID-19 benchmark and our new partnership with the League of American Orchestras to provide some new, additional, hopefully powerful insights for the symphony sector as we go into 2021, which looks like it has at least some light coming up quickly as vaccines are out and folks are making plans to open back up in their venues as the year progresses. So hopefully this data will be helpful and a powerful tool for folks to be able to use. And I'm joined today by Karen Yer from League of American Orchestras, who is the Vice President of Knowledge, Learning, and Leadership. Karen, thanks so much for being here and thanks for having us with you to launch this new partnership.
Oh, Eric, thank you so much. We're really delighted to be part of this project. And, as you alluded to, the timing is just absolutely right. We're just very, very pleased to be part of a partnership that can bring TRG's expertise in analysing this kind of data and, making it relatable and useful to all our members. So thank you so much for joining us with this. And, we're very excited to be able to potentially expand the data set for the benefit of everyone, for members and for our ability to tell the story of the field. So thank you so much, and great to see so many friends on the line.
Indeed. Yeah, it's so many familiar names, so it's so great to get to be with everyone as perhaps there is more of this light coming through for us. So I'm going to share a little bit about the benchmark today, show you some screens, share some data points, talk about how there may be some ways that you can apply it, and then there will be lots of room at the end for Q&A. I'm going to try to get through the bulk of the presentation before jumping into Q&A, just so I can make sure I get all the information out there. I should also say we are recording this, so this presentation will be made available to everyone. So if you want to revisit it, or within the recording, we'll have my contact information. If you have follow-up questions, please do reach out, and happy to help and answer and address any questions that you have. So let's get started. So TRG is a consulting firm who works with visual and performing arts organizations of all shapes and sizes to help grow patron engagement, help develop relationships, and to help create financially resilient organizations. We're headquartered in Colorado Springs, but most of our staff is dotted all over, not just the US, but Canada and the UK. And I'm joining today from the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and just want to give a quick offer of respect and acknowledgement to the tribes of the Mohegan tribes, who are the first peoples on the lands of where I'm calling in from. So just want to offer that moment of respect and thanks there. So we are going to jump into things to talk about the benchmark today. So when we first started it, and I acknowledge that many of you may have heard about it before, some of you are already members in the benchmark and appreciate that. And some of the screens you're going to see today are an update. We actually just released a new version of it. So some of these may look fresh and new, which is exciting. But just to take a step back, where we started from was to help give the sector a sense of revenue impact and challenges associated with what was happening as COVID was unfolding in our sector in 2020. So first was to just say, hey, can we get a comparison set of data points to see what's happening in 2020 versus where we were in 2019? And it has evolved. The benchmark has evolved over time. It's gone global. So we have members from the UK, Ireland, Canada, the US. There are about 500 organizations who are members of the benchmark at this point. It's gotten some extension in terms of how it's been used. So for example, we have a partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts. So the data points you'll be hearing about, many of them have been used in lobbying efforts. Many of our people who are signed up for the benchmark have been using the data to lobby their local organizations and funders to help get more help throughout the process. And now, as we think about reopening and joining back with our patrons, folks are starting to use it to sort of model what their next steps should be. Who should they be focusing on? Where should they be allocating resources? So the benchmark can be helpful in those respects as well. I will also say it is free for folks to join, so there's no cost commitment in joining. And I'm going to show some of the ways the benchmark looks, some of its data points, to hopefully inspire a number of things. So as Karen mentioned, the goals of our partnership are to help provide some insights to the symphony sector. And as we think about recovery and getting back, we know at TRG we're big fans not only of analyzing data, but understanding and using and applying the data to help grow. And we know that's possible. So helping in aiding of the recovery through looking at the data and asking you all to sign up. We're trying to create as big of a data set as possible. The more data that's in the tool, the more robust it will be to help the sector out. The other thing is, and I'll show this off to you, but right now within the benchmark, you can view if you were to join or if you're in it already, you can look at your data, how your sales are going, how your donations are coming in versus the entire aggregated data set. But we are planning, the architecture has already started, to allow you to also filter by just symphonies. So you can log in and see your data against all the other symphonies that are in the data set. So you can get a very genre specific view. And then throughout the year, we're going to be partnering with the League to offer insight reports and trainings on how to get the most out of the system. So stay tuned for more information about that. We also, so this is a nod to my Gen X friends out there. We want to make sure you're in control. So if you join, you get logins. It's a web-based system. So we set you up with usernames, logins for as many people at your organization as you want. And then you can log in whenever you want to try to, learn more about the system and see how your data is performing. And again, like I said, it's all free. It's web-based. You can have as many logins as you want in your organization. So what can it do? Just to lay a foundation, set the table for what the benchmark can do. So it can give you some comparison points of where you are versus your historical sales and giving trends. It can give you a sense of, are you better, worse, the same than everyone else in the aggregated data set? And you'll see what that looks like in a moment. Like I mentioned, it can help in your planning for aiding in recovery and can help sort of show where you might want to, lean in further strategic direction wise, or where you may want to, distribute your resources also in different ways. What can it do? It is not a goal setting tool. It's not meant to be a predictive modeling. It's meant to give you a moment in time look at the data. It won't make choices for you. And at least now, maybe it will in the future, it does not brew a cup of coffee. But who knows? We're always looking for new partnerships, so you never know what will come down the pike. So this is a quick view. I'm going to show a bigger screen of it in a second, but just wanted to give you a quick look at what the overview is. Partly to say, folks have asked us, how often do organizations join? How often should I be looking at it? Well, we have, people are signing up on an ongoing basis. So we're constantly adding new organizations into the benchmark. So know that the data itself changes, the who's included in that aggregated data set. And how often should you log in? That's really up to you, but we're recommending that folks, try to look at it at least once a week. That seems to be a good way to get enough sense of trend happening and a good checking of the temperature of where your results are at that moment. Okay, so before we actually look at some of the screens, Karen mentioned to me that one of the things that the league has been hearing a lot about is wanting to get more data points about what's going on, as a result of COVID. So I'm just going to share some of the data points we've gleaned so far. We study this data on an ongoing basis. So there's actually a January report we just put out, so it's on our website. I can send you a link to it as well, that we look back on the year on what happened with ticket sales and donations from a dollars and cents perspective as well as a units perspective from 2019 to 2020. So this is in North America, everyone in the benchmark in North America. Ticket revenue, probably not a surprise to everyone out there. Revenue down 74%. Units, number of tickets sold, down 72%. When we look at that same data by the orchestras who are participating in the benchmark, revenue down 60% and units down 67%. So I'm going to toggle back and forth here just to show off that little bit of a difference. Donation-wise, so again, North America, revenue down 12%, donation revenue 19 to 20, units up 15%. So that was really interesting to think, we've seen so much down as a result of COVID, but the units being up was a really pleasant, we've been tracking this, but nice, it was nice to see it end on such a good note. Where did that work in the orchestra sector? So actually revenue was up from 2019 to 2020. Giving revenue actually increased for the orchestras participating in the benchmark, up 2%, and units up 35%. Really fascinating stat there about how much more giving happened. Probably not a surprise, or where your minds are jumping to is, oh yeah, a lot of our ticket buyers donated their tickets back because there weren't performances. That absolutely was one of the things that drove this up. And I have another data point to share in a second that gives another shading piece on that. So in orchestras who participated, average gift size 2019 versus 2020. 2019, a little over $2,000 average gift size, so there is major giving in this. 2020, about $1,500. And that makes sense, right? If we go back to this slide, if revenue was up, but units were up dramatically higher, we would have to see the average gift come down a little bit. And then, so this is that interesting other shading. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but let it sit up here for a second because it's such a fascinating and really exciting data point that we learned when we looked back. So in the benchmark, you can see buying and giving patterns, who's doing it, by what we call typology. We also think of that as segmentation, and I've got some definitions that I'll share with you in just a moment about what those segments and what the typology means. But two particular groups, lapsed and stale. So these are folks who have not been with the organization, patrons, haven't bought a ticket, haven't given a gift in 18 months or longer. So going into 2020, they hadn't been with the organization that long. In 2019, folks who fell into these segments gave almost 19,000 gifts in the data set for North America. In 2020, that almost doubled, 36,000 gifts. So these people were not folks who donated their ticket back because they didn't have a ticket purchase last year. So these are folks who we sometimes call as folks who have fallen off the cliff or who have fallen off the mountain, depending on how far back or how long it's been since they've been with your organization, it's harder to get them to come back. If within the last, year and a half, it's like getting them to climb back up a hill. 2 years or more, it's like getting them to climb back up a mountain to come back. But they were so motivated by the messaging around COVID and wanting you all to stay, to be able to continue to provide the great art and service that you do, that lapsed and stale folks really stepped up. Super interesting data point there. The question we would ask the sector is, are you ready? Were you prepared? Are you prepared now to say thanks for doing that? And we have a pathway of welcoming you back into the fold so you stay with us. Okay, so I'm just gonna let this sit for a second and then transition into, out of spoiler alert, and into looking at some of the screens and what happens when you log in. So when you log in, you get this you set up a data feed between TRG and your organization. So if you were to sign up for the benchmark, we set up a phone call conversation with you and your IT folks, and we set up a link. So once that happens, you don't ever even have to send essentially data to us in like an Excel chart or download it or whatnot. We just set up an automatic link between your CRM and our system, and then data on a daily basis flows back and forth. So once that setup happens, you are all set and off and running. So then you log in, and this is the screen you see right away. Hold on for a second. I see a question come in, so I want to make sure we're addressing that. Perhaps regarding, oh great, we have more people saying hello, so that's wonderful, excellent. So you log in here and you get to see a lot of things right away. But the main thing you get to that sort of jumps out is what's been going on with revenue in the last 30 days And you see a couple of lines here. Now the gold line is your organization. So this is the stats of what you've been selling revenue-wise for the last 30 days. And the teal line is the everyone else, the aggregated data set. So you can see, oh, are we ahead? Are we behind? And you get a quick touch base here. So this particular organization sold 100,000 in the last 30 days. The benchmark sold 31,000. We can also see how this year, this 100,000 compares to the same point in 2019. So it's down 70%, the same point in 2020. You could also click on this and change it to quantity of tickets. You could also do year to date instead of last 30 days. Also can look at that through revenue and tickets. So there's a whole bunch of ways, and you just click and it automatically updates, ways that you can just get a really quick, interesting insight of what your data and revenue has looked like in a compressed or in a specific period of time. You also get some headlines around what's going on with your advanced revenue. So how much sales have you made for performances that are coming up? So you get to see that, and it compares it to the benchmark. This other really interesting thing you heard me talk about was the typology. You get a quick insight around what does your typology look right now. So for this particular organization, new customers is the largest active segment. So that's interesting. So this particular organization is doing a good job of getting new people in compared to their other segments. It also gives some insights about donations right away. How much of your organization brought in, what is the benchmark brought in. So you get this really wonderful like smorgasbord of information right away when you log in. You can also drill down. So we're going to look at how in ways that you can do that. But there's essentially sort of 3 topic areas in which you can kind of drill down to as you look at some of the different dashboards within the benchmark. Sales, so revenue in units, looking at advanced sales, we just saw some of that. Customers, we'll dig into some of the segmentation so you can see what participation looks like. You can also slice it and dice it by new versus renew, so you can see what those percentages are of your revenue and how it factors out new versus renew, things of that nature. And then donations. So you can see what donation trends look like. There's also categorization by gift size, major versus smaller gifts. And then you can also, this is actually my favorite one, you can see what proportion, we call it crossover reporting, what proportion of your ticket buyers are also donating. So are you seeing loyalty, and we would call them and statements, are those growing over time or for the moment in time that you're looking at? Okay, so this first is looking at revenue, so ticket revenue. So we've clicked on it. We're drilling down into just looking at this this data point for us. So you see a couple of things right away. Just like on the last screen, the solid gold line is your organization, and this is, we're actually looking at it for the year. So this is sales so far for 2021. This is what sales have looked like for the aggregated data set here in the lower blue line. And then you see these dotted lines. So what are those? The gold dotted line is the sales from the previous year or the year before. And right, you see up top here, we've clicked 2019. So we're looking at the 2019 sales for this particular organization. And then we've got the blue line here. This is the 2019 sales for the aggregated data set. So as folks think about reopening, what's weird about 2021 is we think revenue wise, like if we're setting goals, do we compare that to last year? Do we compare it to 2019? How do we get a sense of what's the right pace that we should be on? And it's, really subjective to each individual organization. But that's an area in which you can make that choice and see both of those viewpoints. We can also see this for advance. So this one, we're actually looking at this current organization for this year versus 2020, so last year. So we're not looking at 2019, we're just looking at 2020. So same principles hold true. The solid gold line is the advance for this organization for this year. So you see they have some sales for performances coming up into sort of the end of the spring, but nothing really in the summer, probably because they don't have performances. This particular, the aggregated data set, blue solid line, so that's this year for everyone else in the benchmark, there are some sales going on. So some organizations have said to us, hey, we're worried about, should we put things on sale again? We're not sure if we might, will those happen or not? Are people willing to buy into the future? What does that look like? So logging into this can give you a sense of, oh, are others actually seeing folks buying into the future? And we are seeing some heat there. And then the dotted lines here are last year for this particular organization, gold dotted, and then the teal blue dotted here, green, is the aggregated data set for last year. So, interesting way to get that sense of what does the future look like. So here's that typology part that I was telling you about. So I'm going to pull these up. So we put the data we get from you all, because we look at transaction dates, we create these segmentations. We apply them for you. And these are the different categories in the mix. And I'm just going to make sure, looks like we might be getting a question in here. A question about Razor having two different CRMs. I'll get to that in a moment, but it's a really good one. Yeah, there's a number of organizations who are working that way. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to hold that question till we get to the sign up piece of it, but it's a really good one and an important one. The categorization, the typology here. So first thing, new acquisition, people who've bought a ticket but haven't shown up yet because their performance is in the future. Current customers once before in the last 18 months, convertees, they've been twice in the last 18 months, actives 3 to 9 times over the last, in their history, and at least once in the last 18 months, super actives 10 plus times in their history, and at least once in the last 18 months. And then our last categories, these were those donors that we were talking about, the re-engaged folks, the stale and the lapse. So the stale, they haven't been here in 18 months or more, lapsed 3 years ago. So when you log into the typology screen, similar principle, you're able to see your organization versus the active data set. So your organization's results, how people are participating from a segmentation standpoint is the gold bar. The green line is the aggregated data set. And you see each of these segments across the top, new customers once before all the way over to lapsed. And you can get a sense here of, oh, are we, so this, when you hear me talk about resource distribution, are we like over servicing one part of our audience base, but perhaps seeing underrepresentation or under participation from another? So you might want to lean in and think about, oh, well, the whole aggregated data set here is getting, in this case, more activity from their super actives. That green bar line here is higher than the gold bar. So perhaps this organization, we don't want to lose any of these people. Do we need to take a step back and say, are we doing everything we can? Do we need to put a little more time and energy or resource into those super actives? Where on the flip side, this organization is doing a better job than the entire aggregated data set of getting new folks in the door. So it's a sign to say, hey, if you're trying these strategies to get new folks in, you get a data point to say that it's working, and it reinforces that resource distribution. So the other thing that other ways that you can look at, what does the activity look from a patron perspective in categories is new and renew. So we have a subscription dashboard that you can look at the views of results by show tickets. So, tickets sold, single tickets, things of that nature, packages, or the combination of single tickets and packages together. So in this case, we're looking at show tickets. That's the purple here. The darker purple is brand new tickets that have been bought. And then the lighter pink is renews. So you can see what proportion of revenue is coming in. And this is over, we pulled this from January through October of 2020. So we could see where sales were coming in month by month and through what proportionality. Y'all can see it from packages, similar perspective, month by month, but also see where that's dividing up. Here, it's new packages are the dark, lighter green is the renewals. And then when we look at all tickets together, it's this blue bar here. So you're able to get a sense of, oh, not only by type of packaging, but are we actually seeing new folks come in? Or is our proportion of renewal extraordinarily high? It again gives you a way to say, are we seeing the right kind of participation from our different segments that really drive revenue? If it was all, renewals coming in here, we'd say you're not having enough new folks coming in the door, and then your pipeline isn't getting full. So it's a great way to get a sense of that. So donation, this one, I'm such a fan of. I love all these dashboards anyway, but this gives you so many interesting data points right at the moment you get into the donation side. You get total number of patron participations, how many people are giving year to date versus same time in 2019. You can switch this to 2020. Total donations, how many are coming in, what the average donation is, how many donations per patron. So are people, responding to, requests to give, to, add-on donation campaigns, to second asks, to third, to special funds? And are you seeing, more people doing that, or are people getting, perhaps some fatigue from those kind of multiple asks? So you get that information right at the top. And then down here, we look month by month, and we see a few things. How much donations have been made revenue-wise this year versus last year. So you don't see the darker blue. Darker blue here is this year for these months into the future, but we see what last year looked like. And then we also see received revenue. So the lines here, we know we get pledges, but not every dollar amount comes in till later. So you're able to track this both through the bars and through the lines to see, how much revenue is coming in and how much is actually, dollars in the bank. And then you heard me talk a little bit about gift size. So we also have a chart here that shows proportionality by major gifts, large gifts, medium, small, things of that nature. So I'm going to pause for a second. I saw a question come in, so I want to make sure we're getting to that. And we're getting all the clarity we need here. Giving data is for individual. Well, that's a good question. So the question here is the giving data for individuals only? So yes, we're not tracking foundation giving, but the nuance in that is, some of you are probably very aware, as you look at your development, as your data from donations, that sometimes donation from a foundation could be an individual's foundation. So, that this particular person, they're themselves, but they've started a foundation. So we look at your categorization and we pull in data that way. So if you have logged it as individual giving, then it would show up here. If you've put it into that governmental or foundation dollars, it would not get pulled in. So we follow the structure that you all use. We don't recategorize things. We use your structure and ways that you classify things. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next screen here, which is the crossover report that you heard me talk a little bit about. So what's great here is you get to see, what percent of donors are also giving gifts. So, this one here, the yellow shows this year, the teal shows the yellow is you, sorry about that. The yellow gold is this particular organization. The teal shows the aggregated data set, and you get to see it by a multi-year format. So we've got 2019 here, 2020, 2021. And what's interesting is, for this particular organization, they're not seeing as many of their buyers also give. So there might be an opportunity to say, hey, we need to lean in a little further and ask, perhaps we've taken the foot off the gas a bit and haven't asked all of our ticket buyers to also donate. We're seeing that in the aggregated data set, there's much more uptick of add-ons or people doing multiple things. So perhaps we can approach that with a little bit of confidence as well. So a couple other just quick slides to show, and then I'll show you about the sign up and then some other data points we're noticing that you might be able to apply in your organization. But this is some of the key, when you log in, data points you could see if we were to create, which you heard me say we're in the architecture of it, so it is in the hopper to come out soon. But to be able to see your data versus everyone else from the symphony sector. So when you log in, you're able to look at the full aggregated data set or just your data against the other symphonies who are in the data set. And some quick touch points you could take a look at is what sales look like in the last 30 days. So we've done some pre-classification. We've created some filters by theater, music in general. So these are all kinds of music organizations, choral as well. And then we have one called Other, which is opera, dance companies, things of that nature. The reason those are linked together is we don't have a lot of opera and dance participation yet. So as those grow, they'll get their own genres as well. But you can see as you log in that genre perspective to see what's going on with my organization versus that viewpoint for the last 30 days. You can see some typology insights as well as some advanced insights just as an instant data point you get to look at. But then you can also drill down into these as well through that filtering element. Great, so what do you do with all of this information? You saw some of those data points on the front end and talked a little bit about, as we were looking at those screens, how some folks have applied them. But one thing we've noticed as we've looked at the entire year of data for COVID is two things. One, which probably isn't, or maybe both aren't going to be surprises to the group, but it's an interesting learning about focus. The organizations that have weathered the storm of COVID the most effectively were the ones who entered into 2020 with the greatest financial resiliency, meaning they had the strongest balance sheets coming into 2020. So the part two of that, as we look at this data and are able to track back and study it, and as well as look at typology, is organizations who had the largest pool of active patrons and the largest pool of new buyers coming in also weathered the storm the best. So being able to have and lean into making sure your pool of relationships, not just revenue, but quantity of folks in your active data set shows to be an indicator of organizations who have weathered the storm the best. Again, probably not a huge surprise, but it's an interesting and important nuance because we talk so much about being revenue resilient, but also quantity of relationship resiliency is also a really important piece of the puzzle that we continually see the reinforcement of. So having as many of these strong relationships as possible. And I think this slide speaks, this data point we looked at the beginning, speaks a great deal about this. So these folks who are lapsed and stale, we often, inside organizations talk a lot about, oh, those folks who aren't with us anymore, and, why did they leave? A lot of these folks, and it is hard to get them to come back, don't remember that or don't think that they're not with you. They still view themselves as patrons of your organization, even though they haven't seen a concert in 18 months or whatnot. And being able to make sure we're talking with those people as well and sharing with them all of the great strategies you all have innovated and tried over the last year, as well as the need, because these numbers underscore that they want you to stick around. They want you to be as resilient as possible. So, this growth huge growth in small gifts that came from these lapsed folks, really interesting to think about. So, again, what do we do with this data? We see these lapsed people coming back. We probably have all said thanks to them. We're all trained, we know to do that, but have we thought through what is the pathway next? How do we go beyond just saying thanks, but understanding that we need to create engagement campaigns to keep them around? So, through the data set, you can look at who gave in 20. Was it new versus renew? Was it reactivated? Where did that fall? Was upgraded, downgraded? And are we taking the time to really get to know who these folks are and starting to cultivate relationships with them? So the first place we would recommend, and we're seeing impact through our clients, is listening to these folks, both internally and externally. So internally, one of the really fascinating things that we've seen happen as a result of COVID is our sector, which has been trying for so long to break down the silos between marketing and development. Like, we all want that to happen, but we haven't been able to get there. COVID has sort of made us have to do that. So we're seeing much more integrated marketing, development, box office departments coming together and strategizing how to really foster strong relationships for all kinds of good reasons. Development is really good at stewarding and cultivating. Marketing is really good at creating action-oriented campaigns. The box office is a really great tool to listen and talk. So let's plan this together as these departments as one, as a collaboration, not only to welcome and think, what do we do with these lapsed and stale folks who came back, but what else are we doing with our other patrons, as who've been with us, stayed with us, as well as our new folks are trying to get to come back in the door and talk with these people. That's the other really interesting thing that's happened from COVID, is so much more listening and talking with our patrons. I love the strategy of box office board members calling patrons and just checking in. We've heard this from telemarketing and telefundraising organizations who run these campaigns, that contact rates are so high, people are picking up the phones. So let's use that as a way to listen. Why did those lapsed people leave us? How can we get them to stay and come back? So let's absorb that information and use that in our planning, and then use that to create smart campaigns. They're having messages that appeal to their needs, to their right times, and let's take what we've learned this way and apply it to strong campaigns, asking them to continue their participation with us. One other piece about the listening I just wanted to bring up, and this was really fascinating to look at. We did a comeback survey that we also released a couple weeks ago, around the same time we released the survey around looking at this data from the benchmark from 2019 to 2020. But we also asked the sector, when are you coming back into venues? When do you think that will happen? How are you working with digital programming? And orchestras, the symphony sector, out of all the other genres, leaned in the most to offer, from the folks, so there were over 100 organizations who participated in the survey. Orchestras leaned in the heaviest to offering paid digital programming. So that was really interesting. It was one of the things we watched folks grapple with in 2020 was, should it be free? Should it be paid? Should we ask for people to RSVP? Should we not? We would say always ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get the data around those folks. And this was how they felt the effectiveness of the digital product was. And you see here, the symphony line is this is the purple here. And 5, we asked people to rate it, and 5 was the best, like the most effective it could be. So lots of 4s here in these categories, like retaining subscribers, retaining subscriber revenue, donor retention, donor revenue, fulfill the mission. This all scored high in the symphony world for why doing and what was effective about paid digital content. Less so around general ticket sales and growing single ticket buyers. It's interesting to dig in and wonder why. Perhaps what was resonating. How did we lean into marketing those campaigns? But it's an interesting learning or headline around the thought around that. So, and we're going into, in many ways, plans are now in place for going back into our venues in 2021. So we asked a question in that survey back to the different genres. When do you think you'll be back to some in-person performances over 2021? So this looks quarter by quarter. And I have the orchestra field here, but orchestra looking really strong of trying to get into the earlier parts of the new year. And one thing we know, I know many of you met with Wolf Brown last week to talk about the survey work they're doing. We see a lot that's happening from arts marketing. A lot of these surveys about patrons' interest and safety and feeling comfortable coming back is us communicating and showing that we've taken the right steps as a sector to make it safe for them to come back. So it'll be interesting as you reopen, as you offer more digital programming, to watch in the benchmark what your typology looks like. Are people participating? Are they not? Where is that? Where are those numbers coming in, so you can get a sense of, not only are we seeing sales come in, but are we seeing them by the typology standpoint? Are we seeing actually our actives, our super actives, come back and participate in these ways? It'll be super fascinating to watch that, and who does come back and keep participating with us. So how do you join the benchmark? I will put this in the chat in a moment, but sign up on our website. There's a link, you just go. There's a just a series of questions you answer, and then that cues up, like I mentioned, this conversation between TRG and folks at your organization to say, hey, is this the right fit? Do we can answer all kinds of questions you may have about privacy, things of that nature, how the data is kept and stored, and how we would take these steps to link our system with your CRM. So right now, there are a handful of CRMs that are already sanctioned to participate. So this goes back to this question that was asked a little earlier about Tessitura and Razor's Edge, and this applies to some of the other CRMs that are out there. Not every CRM is yet compatible with this system. So this is the list of who is compatible right now. And I will say we're like in the very, very tail end of wrapping up the testing around Patron Manager. So in the next week, maybe even less, I believe we'll be adding Patron Manager to this list of compatible systems. But so to answer that question around Tessitura and Razor's Edge is not compatible yet, though is in the hopper. So we could grab your ticketing or the data that you house in Tessitura, but not the data that you house in Razor's Edge at this point. So two more things you may say, well, why would I sign up if my CRM isn't in the system yet? So a couple of reasons. One is we are adding new connections with CRMs as we look at volume. So which CRMs are not on this list that we should be adding, and we look to the ones that have the greatest quantity of representation of people signed up who want to join the benchmark to make those connections happen. They take time, resources, there's expense there, so that's why they're not all happening at once. But if you sign up, we will ask you, if you're not in this list, which one are you on, and that adds to our tally around where the greatest heat is. So that's one piece. The second is by signing up, you get in a queue. So even though if your CRM isn't in the system yet, your place in line is locked in. So when that CRM becomes available, you'll be faster in the line than someone who may sign up later. So that's another value proposition for joining now. And then there's a third, which is you heard me talk about trainings and insight reports that TRG will partner with the orchestra field, with the league, to share with the sector. Everyone is invited to those. So that's a way to, the learnings, what we're gleaning from the sector. Just because you're not a member doesn't mean you can't join or learn about these things. So signing up also gets you on the distribution lists when those invites go out. So that's another reason to think about that. I will, so we'll get to Q&A in just a moment, but I will just give a quick plug. If you want to learn a little more about case studies of organizations who have used the benchmark but have put resilient plans in place over the last year as they've navigated COVID, we have a webinar with the league tomorrow where we'll be documenting. Members of the VSO Virginia Symphony and members of the Toronto Symphony will be telling their stories of what the last year has been like and how they have focused on patron engagement to what tools, tactics, strategies have they employed to stay resilient at this time. And then this, just to have on screen for a moment, like you're going to get this information as well as a follow-up, but here's my contact information. So if we don't get to all of your questions today, or if you have follow-up ones, please, please, please reach out. Happy to help answer and address any questions, concerns, additional data points you're looking for. So I'm going to click the stop share here and dive into some questions. So I'm going to go into the Q&A here. So there's a question about price. This is free. There's no cost to joining. So anybody, as long as the CRM is there right now, you can go in as soon as those meetings happen and the link happen. If it's not the right CRM, you'll get in the hopper, but there's no cost to joining. It's completely free. Jennifer also asks, we're using Patron Manager. If we sign up under other, will we get a notification when Patron Manager is supported? There actually is a, you don't even have to, if you pick other, you should do that, but then it will ask you what your CRM is. So Jennifer, you'll have a place to enter in Patron Manager so we know that's the CRM associated with your organization. But other questions about this? Other pieces of the puzzle I can help answer. I'm going to put in the chat now the sign up. So you all have got that. So give me just a second. So I'm going to enter that here. So that's the link to follow with the sign up. I'm also going to add in my email address so you all have that information. Great. And I see David, thank you for putting in the link to tomorrow's webinar. So if you want to hear about that. So I'm going to look at some of the questions here in the chat. So Sean asks if there are any particular concerns about a consortium. Not that I'm aware of, but those questions could get addressed in the conversation we have when you sign up, and then we have this queue there. But I don't, not that I've come across any. I don't know of anybody who's been stopped because of consortium or if there are issues there. Question here: are orchestra participants? Are the orchestra participants larger budget orchestras? They, I don't know, I don't have all the budget sizes. They're mostly at this point 1s through 4s. So there is representation among a variety, but like I said, we're hoping to build the data set here, but it's mostly 1s through 4s from my understanding of who are currently participating. So in this, there's a question about the scope in the music category that we currently have of a viewpoint. So that currently has in it symphonic, choral music, performing arts centers that mainly have music. So a wide sort of catch-all range. Music schools is also in that category. Let's see, other questions. Where can you find a recording of this? We will be sending an email to all everyone who signed up to attend with a link to the recording from this session. So it'll be made available to you probably by the end of the day tomorrow or early on Thursday. You should receive that. So that'll be coming soon. Yeah, so other questions? I'm happy to hang out and address any others that you all may have. But again, you've got my contact information. Oh, great, some other ones are coming in here. How many opera companies? That's a good question. I don't know how many opera companies are in there, but I can find out. I'm going to make a note about that to get back, Richard, to you about it. And then this question is from Pete. Can organizations participate in the ticket sales section with Tessitura and Razor's Edge donor data later? Yes, absolutely. So it does not have to be an all-in. So if you wanted to just get in your ticketing data through Razor's Edge or through Tessitura, I'm sorry, that is fine. You can absolutely do that. Great. Any other questions? I'll give it a few more minutes, but so appreciate you all taking the time, and like I said, here to address anything you have. Oh, the webinar tomorrow, that is from 3 to 4:30 Eastern time. And I think the registration is in that link that David shared in the chat here. And it's on the League's website. If you go into, I believe conferences and meetings is where the link is to register for that, for tomorrow's webinar. And I will say that spoiler, so you're going to get an additional spoiler alert, is the marketing and development teams from both of those symphonies have graciously agreed to participate in an after the webinar event. So on Friday at that same time, 3 o'clock, 3 to 4, we are going to be having a roundtable where you can come and ask questions from them, because we know it'll probably take, while we will build in Q&A time in tomorrow's webinar, we still have a lot of stories and data to get through in that session. So we're aware that we may not get to every question, but the marketing and development folks from both of those symphonies have so graciously said, yeah, we'd love to, dig into any of the questions folks have or talk through some of the tactics we applied. So on Friday, there will be a follow-up webinar to that, and I will send a link with this, or we'll send a link with this recording to that, to the sign up for that. Oh, great. Asking for the link again for tomorrow. I will put that back in the chat so it is easy to access. So I just put that back in here. Oh, so I sent that. Let me send this to everybody. Great. So you should see that. And let me just make sure. I'm gonna make sure I send this panel. I'm gonna put the sign up link in here one more time because I'm not sure if it went to everybody. So I will add that in here. So this is the sign up benchmark link, and then I'm going to put my email address in here one more time so everyone has that as well. Great. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? One of my colleagues likes to say, if a meeting ends early, we can just give some time back to you. So we could give some time back to everybody. So again, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to be here with you. And you, again, you have my information. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And just great. It's great to be here with you and to watch all the really innovative, wonderful things you all are doing. I'm so in awe of the way you all have thought about patron engagement in such different ways and are really growing our sector. So thank you for everything you do. And looking forward, I hope to see you all tomorrow. So Karen, any last words you'd like to weigh in from the League?
No, thanks, Eric. That was really great. And so thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to you for giving us such a clear run through of the data that you hold and the opportunities to take part in this partnership. Thank you very much.
And thank you. We're so excited to be walking down this path with you. So thank you to everyone at the League. And again, thank you everyone for joining. Have a great day.